You are listening to the Intelligent Racer Podcast, where we look to educate and entertain the endurance racing community through discussions with racing professionals and elite age groupers.
In today's episode, I speak with John Kelly. He's an ultra runner and triathlete who just became the 15th person ever to complete the Barkley Marathons, one of the hardest races in the world. We talk about that race, his triathlons, and other things. I hope you enjoy. John, welcome to the podcast. How you doing today?
Doing pretty well. How are you?
Good. So, before we get into, the big news of you finishing the Barkley Marathons, let's talk a little bit about your background. I mean, what is your athletic background and how did you get into ultra running and triathlons?
Yeah, so I've been running most of my life. I kind of grew up in those mountains around the Barkley course, exploring them. Ran cross country and track in high school, but then essentially took 10 years off of running during college and grad school before really getting back to it. And I wanted to kind of get back into it at that point and see what I was capable of while I was still capable of it, and signed up for a marathon. Disastrous outcome that first time, but it kind of kept going from there. I kept saying, well, I can do better, or I can try adding this other thing or go farther. And that led me down the road to doing triathlons and ultra running.
Awesome. And so, what appeals to you, like a triathlon versus an ultra marathon? I mean, how do you pick and choose what you do? Because obviously the training is quite different, although there's complements between the two.
Yeah. So right now I've got them pretty cleanly separated, where I do triathlons in the summer and ultras in the winter. I could try to mix them a bit, but I'm the kind of person that I don't want to do something unless I'm doing it to the best of my ability. And as you say, you can't train optimally for both at the same time. And really that scheduling just kind of comes down to the weather, really. I mean,
yeah.
Mountains and running on trails is always kind of my first love. And it's great when it's cool outside, but when it gets to the hot, humid DC summer, and I don't have any mountains right outside my back door, what I do have is hundreds of miles of gorgeous rural Maryland countryside that I can ride my bike on. And so I enjoy riding my bike in the summer. In
terms of cross training, though, I mean, do you find the biking and swimming to help with your ultra marathoning and, in terms of the training and such?
So I think that the biking at least might. This is really the first year that I kept some amount of cross training going during my kind of ultra winter season. I kept doing some work on the bike, went to the pool a little bit, did a little bit of strength training. And I think in particular for doing ultras like Barkley that have a huge amount of elevation gain, that extra kind of high intensity work on the bike that's really working your quads, that I feel like helped me. The swimming, I guess you could argue that it maybe helped my core a little bit, but I don't think that there's really a significant translation of swimming fitness to running fitness.
Right. And so how much biking and swimming did you do in the run up to the Barkley?
Yeah. So it was basically kind of my recovery day from running. I would hop on the trainer for an hour or two, and try to do a little bit of high intensity work there. And then I go hop in the pool for half an hour to an hour, which, I recognize isn't a ton, but to be completely frank with you, I'm not a huge fan of swimming. And it was mostly just to try to keep, a huge amount of rust from building up on that.
Right. Yeah.
I did I guess 6 weeks before Barkley, I'm on Team Everyman Jack. And we had our triathlon training camp 6 weeks before Barkley. And so I did go out with those guys and got a ton of swimming and a ton of biking in during that week.
Cool. Where did you guys train?
It was in Vegas.
Oh, nice.
Which, but I think the primary reason was it's got cheap flights from about everywhere, and you would expect the weather to be nice that time of year, but it was actually a bit chilly, at least for biking.
Yeah. I'm actually doing a race in that region coming up. I'm doing St. George 70.3 in, I guess, 3 or 4 weeks, which is I'm flying into Vegas and then driving up to that part of Utah. That's not too, I guess, a couple hours from Vegas, but I know it's a beautiful part of the country, so it must have been pretty cool to train there.
Yeah, it was some incredible rides and some great runs that we got in there as well. Very different than what I have around here.
Yeah, for sure. I'm in New York City, so not too different than DC in terms of East Coast terrain and such. So I know exactly what you're referring to. So professionally speaking, you're in data science and you do analytics. So I mean, how data driven are you in terms of metrics and things with your training? I know there's some people that are on the extreme end of that, other people that go much more by feel. Where do you fit into that kind of range?
So I am pretty meticulous in planning my training and kind of looking at my results. Honestly, I don't dive nearly as much into it, I feel like, as some do, just for the simple fact that I don't have the time to do that. And it's, again, one of those things that if I'm going to do it, I want to do it right. And I feel like I don't have the time to do it right as far as really digging down into all the metrics and all the variables that you can look at, especially with bike training.
Right. Is there any metric that, like heart rate or anything, that you do use, or is it more you just keep it at kind of feel and effort and that kind of thing?
So for running, I use primarily pace and relative perceived effort. Biking, I did start using power and cadence last year, which was a huge boost. I mean, I felt like someone had removed a blindfold from me when I started doing that. But I don't use heart rate all that much. I do kind of when I'm on the trainer or the treadmill, but the simple reason for that is that I don't really like wearing the strap, and I just feel like there's so many things that impact heart rate, from heat to stress levels to sleep. And when it comes down to it, no one ever won a race by having the best heart rate.
Yeah, good point.
So
yeah, I mean, my coaches actually are big subscribers into RPE and just how you're feeling and get used to going by feel and that kind of thing. So from a running perspective, that's sort of where I'm at as well. And then when I'm on the trainer on the bike, I definitely am a big proponent of power and doing intervals and that kind of thing. That's really helped me. So it sounds like you're sort of in the same camp as it relates to that. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, definitely. And there are power meters for running now as well, which I'm actually kind of interested to look into and maybe try those out.
Yeah.
Especially as a trail runner, it's very important. Your pace on a trail is pretty unpredictable, depending on the terrain and the footing and whatnot.
Yeah, for sure. So from a triathlon perspective, you came in second overall at Ironman Maryland last year. So, I mean, that's a huge accomplishment to get anywhere on the podium. But, overall top 2 is amazing. So what else are your goals in triathlon? What do you have for the future? What are you trying to shoot for?
So this year, the main thing I've got on the plate is Kona in October. So that's kind of my focus race. I've also got a few local ones leading into that, and then I'm doing 70.3 Syracuse, where I'd love to get a spot in 70.3 Worlds in Chattanooga, as again that being right down the road from where I grew up, and then I'm also doing Lake Placid, so would love to shoot for a podium there. And Kona, I haven't really had time to sit down and think about what my goal is there, but I think I'd love to get something like the age group podium or top 10 amateur, something along those lines.
Yeah, for sure. That would be pretty amazing. And what's kind of cool is I'm going to be at Syracuse and at Lake Placid. So those are 2 of my races I'm doing this year. So we'll have to try to meet up or something so I could meet you in person. That's really cool.
Yeah, that'd be great. Definitely.
So let's switch gears and talk about Barkley. That's probably the thing that is in top of mind for you and for most people. And so, for those not familiar with it, it's considered one of the hardest trail races in the world. And in the past, 30 plus years, there's only been 14 finishers going into this year, and you are now the 15th. So first of all, huge congratulations on that. That's an amazing accomplishment. And, so for those not that familiar with the race, obviously there's a documentary they should check out, but, what are kind of 2 or 3 of the defining elements that you think are most challenging beyond just the distance? I mean, what else makes this a unique race?
So, I mean, the elevation is definitely much more important than the distance. The distance he labels as 100 miles. It's probably closer to 130. But the elevation is 67,000 feet of climbing during the race, and then equal amount descent. And then the other 2 factors that I guess would say are biggest are one, the navigation. It's off trail. The course isn't marked. You have to be able to follow the course, follow it correctly, and not get yourself lost and lose valuable time that way. And then the other one that has been biggest for me is fighting sleep deprivation by the time that you're getting to that 5th loop, and you've maybe gone 70 or 80 hours since you've had a decent sleep, and just staying focused, remembering why you're out there, and being able to keep moving forward.
Right.
And then on top of those, there's the unpredictable weather, the unpredictable terrain, the briars, a number of others that all factor in.
Right. Yeah, it's a pretty amazing course and unbelievably challenging. So let's dig into a few of those items. So from a navigation perspective, I was following the race pretty closely, and I saw that there was fog, and obviously there was rain towards the end, a storm rolled in and stuff. I mean, how do you deal with fog when you've got these unmarked trails and you have to navigate a tough course? I mean, how did you go about doing that? When I first heard that there was a thick fog rolling in, I was like, this could be a year where no one finishes. And then, you kind of pulled through and, kind of had obviously an amazing race, but how do you deal with that?
Yeah. So that was tough. For sure. We started out at 1:42 a.m. and the fog is bad enough as it is if it's in the day. But when it's at night and your headlamp is reflecting back off the fog into your face, and I mean, you can hardly see your own hand if it's stretched out in front of you. It's really tough. And we took off, and we expected to have a big, strong group at the front because so many good runners were in the race this year. And we got into that fog, and it was just it was chaos. And I still I feel awful about this because everyone was counting on me for navigation, and we kind of messed up in the fog, and everyone got separated, and everyone came back together, and everyone got separated again. And just the excitement of it being right at the start of the race, we're not taking the proper precautions that you should, and constantly checking your compass, checking the terrain underneath your feet to kind of be sure you're on the right features, and making sure you're navigating deliberately. And so there were quite a bit of errors that cost us some big time there at the beginning of the race. And, there were points where it was bad enough where literally there were 4 of us standing there looking at our map and saying that the trail should be right here. Where's the trail? Why can't we find it? And it was literally 2 feet next from us.
Wow.
There were 4 of us standing there, and we could not see the trail that was 2 feet next to us.
Unbelievable.
So, yeah, we emerged from that, and we expected to have a big group of people on at least the first loop. And by the time we got out of the fog, it was me and Gary and Jason Lance was with us as well, a great runner from Pennsylvania. And then by the end of the first loop, it was already just me and Gary, and the fog was a huge cause of that.
Right. And did you panic at all? I mean, you've now, this is your 3rd attempt at the Barkleys. You basically have trained, extremely hard, and then you get thrown this curveball of fog and chaos. Did you feel it slipping away at all, or are you able to stay focused and say, look, there's going to be parts of this race that are crazy or unpredictable, and I just need to keep moving forward? Right.
I mean, definitely no panic. I mean, you kind of, for the speed that you're capable of, you kind of, from experience, you know how much of a buffer you have for those kind of mistakes. And that was pretty awful to eat into that buffer so early on in the race. But the flip side of it was that the year before, I had had an absolute disaster at the beginning of the race. I had gotten ripped down by a briar to the neck and separated from the group. And I did kind of panic a little and went off course and lost, close to an hour and a half right there at the outset. And that experience really helped me this year, where we were going up from that second book. And I told the guys I was with, look, we're still way ahead of where I was at this point last year. So we're good. Let's keep moving and let's deal with this fog, and it'll be gone come daybreak.
Right. Yeah, no, that's an important attitude to have, I suppose. So you mentioned that by the end of loop one, it was you and Gary, and then you guys were together for the 4 loops. And so, how helpful is it to have someone else with you, especially as you start to get tired and sleep deprived? I mean, how helpful was it to be with Gary and have someone to bounce, I guess, navigation off of and other things?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's extremely helpful for minimizing risk and avoiding disaster. And even if you would move slightly faster by yourself, it eliminates that worst, or at least minimizes the chance of that worst case scenario. So, say you might move 10 minutes faster on a loop by yourself, but the worst case scenario when you're by yourself is like 2 hours slower, because there's just that chance that you could have a mental lapse at any point and go slightly off course, or start a descent on the wrong spur or in the wrong draw. And by the time you realize what's going on, you've had some race killing mistake. Whereas if you've got just another set of eyes with you, the chance that you both have that mental lapse at the same time is much lower. And so, you start on that wrong spur or something, and the other person's there to say, hey man, what are you doing? Where on earth are you going?
Yeah.
And, to pull you back and prevent that. So a number of times we did have that, where he would fix my mistake, or I would fix his mistake. And through that, we really navigated quite well from the point at which the fog left all the way to loop 4.
Right. And then so you get to loop 5, where you're now go opposite directions. And so you're on your own. Now you're in, very deprived sleep state. How do you then handle the fact that you really can't afford many more mistakes, especially with the fog on lap 1? You've already given up some of that buffer. So, how do you deal with and stay concentrated for now on your own to have to deal with the navigation and all the challenges?
Yeah. So loop 5 was pretty high pressure, especially there at the beginning. We had gotten to the point in loop 4 where I was feeling good that I would be able to take a nap and then have just a disaster-free loop 5 and be fine. But we did make some mistakes near the end of loop 4 that kind of ate away the last of our buffer. And so I wasn't able to nap before loop 5. And instead of having, a nice time cushion, there really wasn't any time to waste on loop 5. The key thing, though, was still just making solid speed and not having any navigation errors, because at that point, a single navigation error could just cost me the race. And being by myself, and like you said, having the sleep deprivation upped the chances of that. So at that point, it's primarily a mental battle. I mean, my legs felt good throughout that entire loop, but the entire time was just a mental battle to stay focused, to remember what I was doing, what I needed to do, and to not make any costly mistakes. And I did actually end up taking 3 naps during that loop, 2 of them voluntary, and another where I just kind of, I'm still not really sure what happened. But
yeah, I heard about that.
Each of those kind of, it's amazing how much just like a 15-minute nap will clear your head.
Right.
To where, I'm at the point where I'm hardly able to think straight or to walk straight, and I'm worried that I'm going to fall asleep while running even. And just having that 10 to 15-minute nap, and you wake up, and at least for a few hours you're alert and you're focused again, and you're able to keep going without making that big mistake. And the extra speed you can get there kind of makes up the time that you just lost to the nap.
Right. And so for those not familiar with, I guess the race, you were close to 60 hours is the cutoff. And how much sleep did you have in that, close to 60-hour period of time?
So with the early race start, I had gotten maybe 30 or 40 minutes of sleep before the start of the race.
Oh, wow.
And then we took a nap after loop 2, maybe 15 or 20 minutes. And then, like I said, I took 2 naps, about 15 minutes each, during loop 5. So add all those together, and I'd probably gotten just over an hour of sleep. But that's not just going back to the start of the race. That's going back to the morning before the start of the race. So, I'm hitting close to 80 hours at that point with about an hour of sleep.
Do you have did you do any training or anything to get used to the sleep deprivation, or any other strategies? I know I've heard some other people have kind of strategies around how to deal, get efficient naps and those types of things. But did you have anything special, or you sort of just knew kind of how to manage it over the 3 years you've done it, and you just laid down and set a timer and were able to handle it?
Yeah. So, I had experience with it. I had done it some in years past, but really, from my experience, the negative impact that sleep deprivation has on you while training, you can't train as hard, you can't recover as well. Like, you need sleep while you're training. And so that negative impact to me outweighs any potential benefit you get from doing it. Because, to me, it is largely a mental thing. And so you have to have that mental fortitude to be able to still think clearly and fight through it.
Right.
And as far as taking, you get to that point where that you could fall asleep and just, instantly. And so you don't really need to practice getting an efficient nap. But what I did, they gave us these cheap watches for the race this year to be sure that no one had like GPS watch or anything. And I didn't really trust the alarms on those. So each time I knew that I could not make it any farther without a nap, I thought ahead to where the next most miserable place on the course was, likely like a ridge or a peak with a cold wind blowing over it. Somewhere where I could lay down, and I knew that after 10 or 15 minutes, my body would have the choice of either, you lay there and be completely cold and miserable, or you wake up and keep moving.
Wow.
So that worked pretty well. Each time I got about 15 minutes. I think on the second one, I may have hit my imaginary snooze button for 5 minutes or so. But I got up without wasting too much time. I had the clear mind, and I kept making my forward progress.
Wow. That's a interesting strategy. So one thing I've sort of noticed is, at least in recent years, there's been a lot of engineers and, data scientists, things like that do well at the Barkley. Why do you think that is? Is it just the ultimate analytical puzzle?
Yeah. So a lot of the successful people at Barkley are scientists or engineers with advanced degrees. And I think there are 2 pieces of that. One of them I do think is that ability to kind of really break problems down and, break complex problems down into all of their different variables and analyze them and be able to look ahead and say, okay, if there's this chain of events, I need to do this. And it's a lot like a chess match where you're thinking about all the possible things that could happen in the future in order to make your current move. So that is, I think, extremely important. And then the second piece is people that have just had experience having this kind of long-term, extremely difficult goal and being able to just fixate on it. And despite any obstacles or distractions, just continue plowing ahead and making steady forward progress until they reach that goal.
I guess one final question on the Barkley, because, I'm also on the East Coast and I live in New York City. So although we do have hills and mountains within driving distance, there's nothing that's kind of within running distance that I consider really good terrain. And I was reading your blog and it mentioned that you did some incline treadmill work. I'm just curious, what did you do there? I mean, you set it to 20%. And at that point, did you do any intervals? Was it just sort of fast walking?
No. So, it was kind of a quick intervals for me. So I would kind of alternate between 3 and 4 miles an hour at that incline. And I would, so something that I most commonly did is I would do like 30 seconds running and then 30 seconds kind of holding on to the bars on the side, 30 seconds running, and keep alternating back and forth to, be sure that I was kind of getting that constant muscular stimulus without just, completely overloading myself aerobically.
Right. We're almost out of time here. So I guess one final question, which is we've already, I guess, talked about what's next for 2017 in terms of triathlons, but in terms of ultra marathons and going into, I guess, 2018, do you have a desire to go back to Barkley? Are there other races that you are interested in? You've now tackled one of the hardest on earth. So I'm just curious what else is on your bucket list or challenge list that you're looking forward to?
Yeah, so, I definitely don't want to say never on Barkley. I as far as doing it again at some point in the future, I don't see myself doing it next year. I'm looking forward to going and maybe helping someone else out and kind of being a part of the camp and a part of the race from the side that I've never seen, because I've always been one of the last people in, and by the time I get in, the whole camp kind of clears out. So as far as racing goes, I'm still kind of trying to think through that myself. There are a couple that I have my sights on, kind of a couple small low key ones, or I might go for like some fastest known times in the area. They're eventually on my bucket list. I'd love to do some of the big ones out western states, and then in particular do some of the more mountainous ones, is that's kind of my big strength. So like Hard Rock and UTMB. Kind of the issue with that, with my current schedule, is those are all during the summer when I'm doing triathlons at the moment. So we'll have to see how things play out and see how I'm kind of able to arrange things in the future to work those in.
Right. Well, that sounds like a pretty good plan, and good luck with your triathlon season coming up, and hopefully I get to see you at Syracuse and Lake Placid. But John, thank you so much for your time today, and thanks for sharing on your journey and your race at Barkley. It's an amazing accomplishment, and I'm sure this is only 1 week removed, so you're still kind of recovering, but really amazing stuff. So congratulations again, and thank you.
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me on. I enjoyed the discussion.
Thanks for listening to the Intelligent Racer podcast. For more information on this and other episodes, please visit www.intelligentracer.com. Also, be sure to check us out on social media, and please review us on your podcast directory. Join us next time for another edition of the Intelligent Racer.